Seeing a dignified 100 billion level supremacy and core elder of the Epic Alliance was actually so excited, Lin Feng did not know what to say. He had some vague guesses, but he could not be sure. After a long while, when Elder Ether's emotions had calmed down a little, Lin Feng slowly asked, "Elder Ether, what exactly do you mean by hope?" "Hope? Of course, it's the hope of surviving the epical cataclysm." "Is there a way to survive this epical cataclysm?" Lin Feng's expression turned solemn at once as he stared intently at Elder Ether. The ninth epical cataclysm was the ultimate cataclysm of destruction. Even Lin Feng was not confident that he could survive this cataclysm. After all, to survive the cataclysm, one could only become a Kiliacosm sovereign. However, how difficult was this? Even if Lin Feng had transformed into a universe, and was confident that he could become a 3-star supremacy, what was a Kiliacosm sovereign? He might not be able to become a Kiliacosm sovereign even if he devoured all the origin of a small Kiliacosm. Otherwise, wouldn't Kiliacosm sovereigns be found everywhere? Now that Elder Ether actually said that there was a chance of surviving the Great Calamity, Lin Feng naturally took it very seriously. Elder Ether looked at Lin Feng, who had a solemn gaze, and said in a low voice, "To survive the cataclysm, one has to become a Kiliacosm sovereign. No one can guarantee that they can become a Kiliacosm sovereign. The hope I mentioned is only 1 in a billion. Can even be considered illusory, but there's at least a slim chance. Actually, the hope I mentioned is the hope of saving Supremacy Epic. If Supremacy Epic can survive with the Supreme Pagoda, the spatial supreme treasure of Supremacy Epic, there's still a chance." The Supreme Pagoda? Lin Feng fell into deep thought. Although he did not understand the profundity of the Supreme Pagoda, relying on the Supreme Pagoda, Supremacy Epic could even suppress the celestial devil ancestor who was above his level for 10,000 years. This was enough to show how precious and miraculous the Supreme Pagoda was. However, Lin Feng was quick to doubt that the Supreme Pagoda could allow them to survive the epical cataclysm. As if sensing Lin Feng's disbelief, Elder Ether hurriedly said, "Dark Domain Supremacy. Of course the Supreme Pagoda can't resist the ultimate epical cataclysm. However, Supremacy Epic is different. He's an expert who has existed since the first epic. It's not impossible for him to survive the epical cataclysm. Moreover, there's still 1 billion years before the epical cataclysm. With Supremacy Epic around, we might be able to figure out a solution. For example, elders like us once had an idea. Since we can't survive the epical cataclysm, why don't we leave this small Kiliacosm? Only a spatial supreme treasure like the Supreme Pagoda has a slim chance of breaking through the barrier of the small Kiliacosm, so that we can leave this small Kiliacosm to head to other small Kiliacosms." Lin Feng's eyes lit up. This was indeed a solution. After leaving this small Kiliacosm and heading to other small Kiliacosms, perhaps other small Kiliacosms would also experience the epical cataclysms, but there would be sufficient time for everyone to cultivate. For example, if Lin Feng had more time, forget about a few epochs, even in 10 billion or 100 billion years, Lin Feng might have a chance of becoming a Kiliacosm sovereign. What Lin Feng wanted was nothing more than hope. All of this could not be done without Supremacy Epic and the Supreme Pagoda. Let's consider this a reason for the time being. Moreover, I admire Supremacy Epic's character very much. If there's hope, I'm also willing to contribute my strength to save Supremacy Epic. However, as far as I know, Supremacy Epic sacrificed himself to suppress the celestial devil ancestor. How can we save him? Lin Feng had clearly accepted Elder Ether's reason. Supremacy Epic could not die. Or rather, Supremacy Epic had to live. Only if Supremacy Epic lived, and by relying on the Supreme Pagoda, could everyone have a trace of hope of surviving the cataclysm. Elder Ether hurriedly said, "It's naturally best that the Dark Domain Supremacy can understand. Supremacy Epic did sacrifice himself to suppress the celestial devil ancestor, but in reality Supremacy Epic is not dead yet. He has only fused with the Supreme Pagoda and used the power of the Supreme Pagoda to suppress the celestial devil ancestor. However, the celestial devil ancestor is a 3-star celestial devil emperor, and his power is infinite. The celestial devil ancestor would be suppressed for at most 10,000 years before he can escape. At that time, only death awaits Supremacy Epic. We once thought of joining forces to save Supremacy Epic. Unfortunately, the power of a 3-star celestial devil is simply absurd. Without reaching the 3-star level, we can't contend with him at all. Supremacy Epic also left a clear warning. Don't even think about saving him until a 3-star supremacy is born. A 3-star boundary stone has never been born in our small kiliacosm. Even if there were any 3-star boundary stones in the past, they were brought here by those medium kiliacosm factions from the medium kiliacosm. Their purpose was to cause internal strife among us. It's impossible to obtain a 3-star boundary stone, let alone become a 3-star supremacy. But now, with the dark domain supremacy, things are different. You are not restricted by the 3-star boundary stone at all. Even without the 3-star boundary stone, you can still become a 3-star supremacy. At that time, if you become a 3-star supremacy, you can contend with the celestial devil ancestor, and you can naturally save Supremacy Epic. Lin Feng came to a realization. It turned out that Elder Ether was still counting on Lin Feng to become a 3-star supremacy. However, how difficult was it to become a 3-star supremacy? Lin Feng smiled weakly and shook his head. I believe there's no need for me to explain to Elder Ether how hard it is to become a 3-star supremacy. Even if I don't need a 3-star boundary stone, becoming a 3-star supremacy is difficult as ascending to the heavens. Lin Feng was not being humble. Even though he was constantly collecting boundary stones, he was not sure if he could actually become a 3-star supremacy in a short period of time. That's right, becoming a 3-star supremacy is very difficult. However, dark domain supremacy, for this trace of hope, the Epic Alliance can help you with all we have. No matter what request you make, we will do our best to fulfill it. The entire Epic Alliance will support you, because you are the only hope. What? Lin Feng could not quite believe it. However, seeing that Elder Ether did not seem to be joking, he became a little suspicious again. Will you really agree to any request I make? That's right. What if I want all the celestial devils? You want all the celestial devils for conversion into world origin, right? That's naturally not a problem. In reality, the few of us core elders have already obtained a lot of world origin from besieging the celestial devil world. We haven't devoured it and actually stored all of it, just so that we can use it for where it's most needed one day. Giving all of it to you won't be a big deal. Then what if I want supreme treasures as well? Yes. Boundary stones? As long as we have boundary stones, we'll offer all of them. Lin Feng made increasingly demanding conditions, but without exception, Elder Ether agreed to them all generously. This made Lin Feng suspicious instead. Lin Feng could not really believe negotiation of such a joking nature. However, the other party was a genuine 100 billion level supremacy, which was even more intriguing. Do the core elders really have that much authority? Lin Feng pondered for a moment and asked solemnly. Haha, dark domain supremacy, you underestimate elders like us too much. Forget it. I'm afraid you might not believe anything I say. You and I can go to the celestial devil world together. All the core elders are besieging the celestial devil world there. At that time, there will even be trillions-level supremacies who can make promises to you. Personally, Elder Ether's words made Lin Feng thrilled for a moment. Actually, he already somewhat trusted Elder Ether. After all, there was no need for a 100 billion level supremacy to lie to him at all. However, the question was whether Elder Ether could represent all the core elders. Hence, it was imperative to meet all the core elders. The two of them acted on their word and immediately prepared to leave. Lin Feng no longer needed to oversee the Epic Alliance headquarters at all times. As Lin Feng's reputation spread, who would dare to cause trouble at the Epic Alliance headquarters? All right, let's go. Hence, Elder Ether stepped forward and disappeared from the courtyard. He was actually also warping space, but he did not enter the Supreme Spatial Passage. Up until now, Lin Feng had never encountered anyone who had comprehended the Supreme Spatial Passage. Even Supremacy Epic could only warp through it by relying on the Supreme Pagoda. Lin Feng could also do ordinary spatial warps. Hence, Lin Feng also stepped forward, locked onto Elder Ether, and quickly followed. Swoosh! He lost count of how many times they warped before Elder Ether stopped. "We're here." Lin Feng followed Elder Ether's gaze and saw a huge celestial devil world. This huge celestial devil world was unprecedentedly massive and gave off a great deal of pressure. Even a glance from afar felt daunting. That was the lair of the celestial devils, the true core of half a small kiliocosm. The celestial devil world that had once been personally built by the celestial devil ancestor. However, at this moment, the celestial devil world was densely surrounded by infinite world power, and there was a faint aura of brutal battle. Even a trace of that world power was very terrifying. It was not inferior to Lin Feng and Elder Ethers. Clearly, they were all world powers of 100 billion level supremacies. "Let's go. Follow me to meet the elders. I believe all the elders will be very happy to know about the arrival of the dark domain supremacy." Elder Ether took a step forward and flew in front of the celestial devil world. There was an artifact floating in front of the celestial devil world, firmly entrapping it. This was the supreme treasure of the elders. The elders were also in that supreme treasure now. Swoosh! Lin Feng and Elder Ether both flew into the supreme treasure. Vaguely, gazes were instantly directed at Lin Feng. There was confusion, surprise, and so on in these gazes. They were probably all elders. Lin Feng was also observing these elders. In reality, there were differing claims about how many core elders there were in the Epic Alliance. Many controllers did not know, and even those two-star supremacies did not know. After all, the core elders were only established temporarily, or even a temporary title. In the past, when Supremacy Epic was around, Supremacy Epic was the only person presiding over the Epic Alliance. There were no core elders at all. In order to condense the combat power of the Epic Alliance and maintain it, these 100 billion level supremacies had temporarily created the title of core elders after Supremacy Epic disappeared. In reality, as long as one was a 100 billion level supremacy and was a member of the Epic Alliance, they would be a member of the core elders. In other words, the current Lin Feng had actually automatically become a core elder of the Epic Alliance and had truly entered the core of the Epic Alliance. Dark domain supremacy this way. All the elders are waiting for you. At some point, Elder Ether had already come beside Lin Feng with a faint smile on his face. Lin Feng nodded and followed Elder Ether into the hall. Boom! Lin Feng stepped into the hall. This time, gazes swept across Lin Feng without restraint. These gazes were all unrestrained and condescending, as if they were looking down on Lin Feng. Ha! Lin Feng was no longer the same as before. Even though he knew that the controllers in this hall were all core elders and at least 100 billion level supremacies, he still felt very uncomfortable being sized up by these people so brazenly. Hence, Lin Feng released a slight amount of his world power and shook these gazes one by one. It could be considered a minor reminder. As soon as Lin Feng's world power erupted, it was immediately noticed. Hence, some core elders exclaimed faintly. Clearly, they were all very shocked that Lin Feng was already a 100 billion level supremacy. Ether seemed to be still communicating about something. Lin Feng also roughly learned that apart from him, there were a total of 21 supremacies at the 100 billion level in the hall. They were all core elders of the Epic Alliance. This lineup surprised even Lin Feng. In the past, he had also vaguely guessed that there were probably between 5 to 10 core elders in the Epic Alliance. However, who would have thought that there were actually a total of 21 core elders? However, on second thought, he was not too surprised. If there were only a few core elders, how could they suppress the celestial devil world, and even besiege it, such that those celestial devils did not dare to leave it? Dark domain supremacy. Please take a seat. Suddenly, a magnificent voice interrupted Lin Feng's thoughts. Lin Feng looked up. It was an elder sitting in the middle of the hall. His body was massive, and he did not seem to be an ordinary cultivator. Furthermore, the aura on his body was magnificent and vast. Even Lin Feng felt a strong sense of threat. It felt as if once this elder attacked, even if Lin Feng had the rules of time, he would probably be killed in an instant. This was the true foundation of the Epic Alliance. This is Supremacy Divine Jade. Currently, he's the only supremacy above the 10 trillion level in the Epic Alliance. He's the strongest supremacy in the Epic Alliance apart from Supremacy Epic. Currently, he's also presiding over the entire Council of Core Elders. Lin Feng heard Elder Ether's voice transmission, introducing this extraordinary supremacy to Lin Feng. Thank you, Supremacy Divine Jade. Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He bowed slightly to Supremacy Divine Jade, and followed Supremacy Divine Jade's gesture to sit at the last seat on the right. Once he sat down, it also meant that he had officially become one of the core elders of the Epic Alliance. His status was equal to the 21 core elders in the hall. Although the other core elders had objections, since even Supremacy Divine Jade had spoken, they naturally would not object. At this moment, Elder Ether stood up and said, Supremacy Divine Jade and Elders, I went to the Epic Alliance headquarters this time to resolve the matter of Ancestor Greenwood. Unfortunately, I was a step too late. Too late? Could the Epic Alliance headquarters have been destroyed by Ancestor Greenwood? This Ancestor Greenwood was already causing trouble in the 5th Epic back then. Supremacy Epic even personally hunted him down. He was lucky enough to escape, yet he still doesn't know how to restrain himself. We definitely can't tolerate such audacity. That's right. Even when Ancestor Greenwood was at his peak, what would we fear? He deserves to be killed. Many core elders were furious. As core elders of the Epic Alliance, they naturally valued their reputation the most. Although the Epic Alliance headquarters was only temporarily established, no matter what, it was still the Epic Alliance headquarters. Once the Epic Alliance was destroyed, the ones who would really be humiliated would be core elders like them. No, the Epic Alliance headquarters was not destroyed. However, Ancestor Greenwood has already been dealt with by the Dark Domain Supremacy. Elder Ether gave a half-smile and said meaningfully. As soon as Elder Ether finished speaking, the entire hall fell strangely silent. Even a pin drop could be heard. What kind of entity was Ancestor Greenwood? Perhaps the other controllers did not know, but as 100 billion level supremacies and core elders of the Epic Alliance, even when Supremacy Epic was around, they were all famed and had high statuses. Many elders had experienced a few epochs. How could they not know how powerful Ancestor Greenwood was? If Ancestor Greenwood was at his peak, there would probably only be a few supremacies in the hall who could defeat Ancestor Greenwood. Supremacy Divine Jade was probably the only one who could be fully confident of killing Ancestor Greenwood. However, Lin Feng was only a 10 billion level supremacy in the past. Although he did not know how Lin Feng had become a 100 billion level supremacy, was it possible for him to kill Ancestor Greenwood? Ancestor Greenwood died at the hands of the Dark Domain Supremacy? Impossible, absolutely impossible. Could the news be wrong? Ancestor Greenwood only did not attack the headquarters out of wariness for the reputation of the Epic Alliance, and escaped instead. That's possible. But if Elder Ether had investigated, how could he not have investigated thoroughly? There's another possibility. Perhaps Ancestor Greenwood escaped the pursuit of Supremacy Epic, but after so many years, he was also severely injured, and less than 10% of his power remained. Many elders discussed avidly. They could not believe it. Even if Lin Feng was a 100 billion level supremacy, and managed to be qualified to become an elder, it was impossible for him to kill Ancestor Greenwood. At this moment, Elder Ether smiled and said, "This news is absolutely true. According to the news I received back then, Ancestor Greenwood hated our Epic Alliance to the bone because the Supremacy Epic hunted him down. Hence, as soon as he appeared, he went straight to the Epic Alliance headquarters, intending to completely destroy the Epic Alliance headquarters to take his revenge. However, later on, he was stopped by the Dark Domain Supremacy. In the end, he was killed by the Dark Domain Supremacy. This news was actually both true and false. Lin Feng did not refute. Although Ancestor Greenwood was not dead, he was suppressed by Lin Feng in the internal Kiliacosm domain, and was no different from being dead. Moreover, he also understood Elder Ether's goal. This was to advocate for him. Clearly, Elder Ether had already communicated with Supremacy Divine Jade in secret, and Supremacy Divine Jade had agreed to Elder Ether's decision. Now, Elder Ether would begin to advocate for Lin Feng. Otherwise, it would indeed be a little difficult to get all 21 elders to support Lin Feng unconditionally. Even with the support of Supremacy Divine Jade, it would not work. Since they were advocating for him, Lin Feng might as well go along with it. Killing Ancestor Greenwood is a great merit. Back then, Supremacy Epic was deeply angered by Ancestor Greenwood, and even personally hunted him down. Unfortunately, Ancestor Greenwood escaped. Now, the Dark Domain Supremacy has killed Ancestor Greenwood. If Supremacy Epic were here, he would definitely be very happy. That's right. Ancestor Greenwood has almost become a nagging problem for Supremacy Epic. Supremacy Epic had always brooded over his failure to kill Ancestor Greenwood. We naturally all acknowledge the Dark Domain Supremacy as a core elder. He has also made great contributions to the Epic Alliance, and deserves to be rewarded. After these core elders confirmed repeatedly that Lin Feng had killed Ancestor Greenwood, their gazes also became kind. They were all controllers protected by Supremacy Epic. It was all thanks to Supremacy Epic that they could survive one after another epical cataclysm. These core elders would naturally accept anything that could make even Supremacy Epic grateful. If Lin Feng had killed Ancestor Greenwood, naturally he would be able to integrate into the core elders very easily. Seeing the change in the attitudes of the many elders, Elder Ether struck while the iron was hot and continued. Actually, the current situation is far from critical. It's not impossible for us to welcome Supremacy Epic back. Huh? Elder Ether, what are you saying? Does Elder Ether have a way to save Supremacy Epic? Could Elder Ether have found how to save Supremacy Epic? As soon as they heard that they could save Supremacy Epic, all the elders in the hall became worked up. Their gazes gathered on Elder Ether. Lin Feng saw that the expressions of these elders did not seem to be fake. They were indeed sincere in wanting to save Supremacy Epic. It seemed like Supremacy Epic actually carried a great deal of weight in the hearts of these elders. If they were ordinary members of the Epic Alliance, they might also respect Supremacy Epic very much. However, after learning about Supremacy Epic's situation, they would only lament about it. To these core elders, however, Supremacy Epic meant more than that. Supremacy Epic was the savior of almost every elder. Without Supremacy Epic, it would have been impossible for them to survive the epical cataclysms. Moreover, if they could welcome Supremacy Epic back, there might be a trace of hope for surviving this final epical cataclysm. No matter how slim the hope was, there was still a trace of hope. After all, Supremacy Epic could be said to be the controller who knew the most about the epical cataclysms. He had survived the 1st to the 8th cataclysms, for a total of 8 epical cataclysms. Elder Ether looked at the many excited elders and said in a low voice, "Of course I have a way. Moreover, the key to saving Supremacy Epic lies in the Dark Domain Supremacy." Swoosh! More than 10 intense gazes converged on Lin Feng. Many elders were very confused and curious. Even if they acknowledged Lin Feng as an elder, and Lin Feng had even killed Ancestor Greenwood, so what? Could he actually save Supremacy Epic? After all, even with Supremacy Divine Jade's strength, he could not save Supremacy Epic. Elder Ether, we are all a little confused. How can the Dark Domain Supremacy save Supremacy Epic? One of the elders could not help but ask. It's very simple. As long as the Dark Domain Supremacy can become a 3-star supremacy, all the problems will be resolved. Elder Ether's words immediately caused an uproar among the many elders. A 3-star supremacy? How can he become a 3-star supremacy without a 3-star boundary stone? Elder Ether, are you confused? If it were that easy to become a 3-star supremacy, we wouldn't be sitting here doing nothing. Could the Dark Domain Supremacy actually have a 3-star boundary stone? At this moment, Supremacy Divine Jade suddenly spoke. Although the Dark Domain Supremacy doesn't have a 3-star boundary stone, he is a true controller who transformed into a universe. I believe everyone knows very well what transformation into a universe means. Even without a 3-star boundary stone, as long as he has sufficient resources, the Dark Domain Supremacy has a chance of becoming a 3-star supremacy. Boom! Supremacy Divine Jade's words made many elders mind blown. They were incomparably shocked. Transformation into a universe. Was the Dark Domain Supremacy Lin Feng actually a true controller who transformed into a universe, a supreme figure who could become a true Kiliacosm sovereign in the legends? For a moment, all the elders looked at Lin Feng with shock, envy, curiosity, and a faint trace of excitement. 3-star supremacy. All controllers, including Supremacy Epic, yearned to become a 3-star supremacy, but were limited by the 3-star boundary stone. Almost no one in the small Kiliacosm could become a 3-star supremacy. But now, hope had appeared before all of them. Transformation into a universe. There's really a controller who transformed into a universe. Incredible, truly incredible. Originally, I had thought the rumors in the outside world were nonsense. We've lived through so many epochs. When have we ever seen a controller who transformed into a universe? But now, a controller who transformed into a universe has actually been born. A controller who transformed into a universe would not be restricted by the boundary stone at all. In other words, if the Dark Domain Supremacy has sufficient resources, he might really become a 3-star supremacy, even without a 3-star boundary stone. Hope. This is really hope. If Supremacy Epic were here, he would probably be overjoyed. It is hope for all of us. We'll support him and support him fully. We've lived through several epochs and survived until now. How can we not know the severity of the situation? If the Dark Domain Supremacy is really a controller who transformed into a universe, he's our only hope. No matter the price, we won't hesitate. In the hall, all the elders were discussing spiritedly. Their expressions revealed incredible excitement. In that case, does everyone agree to fully support the Dark Domain Supremacy's cultivation? Supremacy Divine Jade said slowly. We'll support it. Of course we'll support it. That's right. The Dark Domain Supremacy is our only hope. How can we not support him? Supremacy Divine Jade, we were all saved by Supremacy Epic. We were once protected by Supremacy Epic. How can we not know the severity of the matter? Only if the Dark Domain Supremacy becomes a 3-star supremacy can he save Supremacy Epic. Of course we have to support him. Lin Feng was actually a little surprised. If he were in these elders' shoes, and a controller suddenly came up to him requesting full support, even at the cost of precious world origin, he would definitely be unwilling to agree to it. However, as soon as they heard that Lin Feng was a controller who transformed into a universe, these elders' attitudes changed. All of them supported him wholeheartedly. Only now did Lin Feng truly understand the weight of transformation into a universe. Or rather, it was the weight of Supremacy Epic in the hearts of these elders. As long as they could save Supremacy Epic, even if there was only a trace of hope, they were willing to pay any price. Very good. I'm very gratified that all the elders have agreed. Back then, Supremacy Epic sacrificed himself to suppress the Celestial Devil Ancestor. Otherwise, the entire Epic Alliance would have been destroyed by the Celestial Devil Ancestor now, and even the entire small Kiliacosm would be under the rule of the Celestial Devils. Supremacy Epic made such a huge sacrifice, but we were unable to save him. I'm truly ashamed to the extreme. However, there's hope now. The Celestial Devil Ancestor is a 3-star Celestial Devil Emperor. Only a 3-star supremacy can contend with him. If we want to save Supremacy Epic, only a 3-star supremacy can save him. In the past, we were all limited by the absence of a 3-star boundary stone. Now, with the Dark Domain Supremacy, we no longer need a 3-star boundary stone. The Dark Domain Supremacy doesn't need a boundary stone to have a chance of becoming a 3-star supremacy. Everyone knows very well how difficult it is to become a 3-star supremacy. Hence, we have to provide all the world origin to the Dark Domain Supremacy. Moreover, if the Dark Domain Supremacy has any requests, we have to satisfy them with all we have. We will gather all the power of our entire Epic Alliance to help the Dark Domain Supremacy to become a 3-star supremacy. Supremacy Divine Jade's words were resolute and revealed a trace of determination. They would combine the power of the entire Epic Alliance to help Lin Feng. If anyone else had said this, even if it was Elder Ether, Lin Feng would be uncertain. However, since it was Supremacy Divine Jade who said this, things were different. The current Supremacy Divine Jade was the only supremacy above the trillion level in the Epic Alliance, and he was practically the strongest person in the Epic Alliance. His words were absolute. Lin Feng's expression was also very solemn. He had devised a way to gather a large amount of boundary stones, and could even obtain a large amount of world origin by himself. However, whether he had the support of the Epic Alliance would change things completely. With the support of the Epic Alliance, just the boundary stones these core elders could provide would definitely far exceed Lin Feng's imagination. In fact, by mobilizing the power of the entire Epic Alliance, it would also be easier for Lin Feng to collect boundary stones and world origin. The current situation was urgent. The epical cataclysm was approaching, and even the 10,000-year deadline was approaching. Once Supremacy Epic was really dead and the Celestial Devil Ancestor escaped, Lin Feng was not confident that he could deal with the Celestial Devil Ancestor. After all, up until now, Lin Feng still did not know how strong a 3-star Emperor was. It would naturally be best if he could become a 3-star Supremacy as soon as possible and save Supremacy Epic. Dark Domain Supremacy, feel free to ask for anything. All the elders of our Epic Alliance will support you fully. You only have one goal, and that is to become a 3-star Supremacy as soon as possible. Moreover, you only have 10,000 years. Otherwise, once the Celestial Devil Ancestor escapes, we won't be able to resist him at all. Supremacy Divine Jade looked at Lin Feng and said in a low voice. His expression was also very solemn. Lin Feng pondered for a moment, then said, I need boundary stones, a large number of boundary stones. Any kind of boundary stone is fine. Of course, the higher the quality, the better. Moreover, I also need world origin, a large amount of world origin. As long as there's enough of both, I believe I can definitely become a 3-star Supremacy in 10,000 years. Do you have any other requests? Supremacy Divine Jade continued to ask. Lin Feng thought for a moment, then said, It would be best if there are some texts that can allow me to understand what a 3-star Supremacy is. I'm afraid that's not possible. 3-star Supremacies have never been born in our small Kiliacosm. The few appearances of 3-star Supremacies before the epical cataclysms were all people who belonged to the medium Kiliacosm factions and descended from the medium Kiliacosm. They had invincible power and swept through everything, but we know nothing about their exact situation. Lin Feng nodded to himself. He was not too disappointed. After all, how precious was information on 3-star Supremacies? How could it be so easy to obtain? Lin Feng was exploring on his own now. However, he also had a direction, and that was to constantly increase the power in his internal Kiliacosm domain. As his strength increased, he believed that sooner or later, he would be able to become a 3-star Supremacy. This was the crudest and simplest dumb method, but it was also very effective. The only troublesome thing was that the consumption of resources was a little huge. However, with the full support of the Epic Alliance, Lin Feng was still very confident that in 10,000 years, he would definitely become a 3-star Supremacy. All right, all the elders have heard the conditions of the Dark Domain Supremacy. Now, it's up to us to support him. Supremacy Divine Jade lifted his head and swept his gaze across the many elders. His meaning could not be clearer. I don't have any world origin, since I've used it all myself. However, I still have some boundary stones and they're 2-star boundary stones. There are a total of 3 2-star boundary stones, all of which are 10 billion level 2-star boundary stones. I originally meant to leave them for the future generations. Unfortunately, up until now, no descendant of mine has been able to become a 2-star Supremacy. Now, let me contribute a little of my strength. The first to speak was Elder Ether. He took out 3 boundary stones, and they were all 10 billion level 2-star boundary stones. This was very generous. Even Lin Feng's eyes widened. It was really unbelievable to see 3 10 billion level 2-star boundary stones at once. If these few 2-star boundary stones were devoured by Lin Feng, they could even give rise to the combat power of tens of billions of worlds. Lin Feng had thought that he already thought highly of these core elders, but now, he felt that he had still underestimated them. All these dignified 100 billion level supremacies who could become the core elders of the Epic Alliance were invincible experts who had lived through several epochs. Their wealth was unimaginable. Over a few epochs, they would definitely be able to collect some valuable things. Even these 2-star boundary stones were far from the best in their collection. They only gave them to Lin Feng because he only needed boundary stones and world origin. Haha, speaking of boundary stones, I also have 1 2-star boundary stone and 10 1-star boundary stones. I'll give them all to the dark domain supremacy. Me too. I don't have many boundary stones, but I saved some world origin. It's originally for my good-for-nothing disciple. However, since the dark domain supremacy needs it now, I'll give it to you. There's about 5 billion portions of world origin. I have both world origin and boundary stones. After Elder Ether took the lead to offer 3 2-star boundary stones, many elders also offered their assets. It had to be said that these elders' wealth was really abundant to the extreme. Even if they did not specially collect the boundary stones, over a few epochs with their powerful strength, they had unintentionally accumulated a large amount of boundary stones. Even Lin Feng was incomparably tempted. Moreover, there was also no lack of world origin. Even if the elders used some of it themselves, the remaining amount of world origin was still astronomical. In the end, Lin Feng obtained a large amount of boundary stones and world origin. There were about 100 billion portions of world origin. There were not many boundary stones, but their quality was very high. Lin Feng estimated that if he could devour them all to grow Kiliacosm domains, Lin Feng's combat power would definitely be increased by at least 1 trillion worlds. How terrifying was this? In other words, Lin Feng had already obtained 1 trillion worlds worth of cultivation resources in such a short period of time. As long as he was given time, he could quickly increase his combat power by 1 trillion worlds. Dark Domain Supremacy? Are you satisfied? Supremacy Divine Jade asked with a smile. Yes, of course I'm satisfied. Lin Feng was indeed very satisfied. Moreover, he could tell that these elders did not hold back at all. They took out almost all the boundary stones and world origin. They had indeed fulfilled their promise to fully support Lin Feng. It's great that you're satisfied. However, these cultivation resources are probably still far from enough for the dark domain supremacy to become a 3-star supremacy. We still have to mobilize all the forces of the Epic Alliance to search for boundary stones. As for us, we'll plunder world origin without restraint. Humph, those celestial devils are hiding in the celestial devil world now. Then, we'll take down all the other celestial devil worlds in one fell swoop. A sharp glint also flashed across Supremacy Divine Jade's eyes. In the past, the reason he had never thought of taking down all those celestial devil worlds in one fell swoop, and did not even attack the other celestial devil worlds, was that he felt that it was unnecessary. After all, so what if they destroyed the other celestial devil worlds? The main force of the celestial devils was in this celestial devil world. As long as nothing happened to the celestial devils in this celestial devil world, the celestial devils would always exist, and they could preserve their strength. They only needed to wait until the 10,000 years were up. Once the celestial devil ancestor broke free, it would be time for the celestial devil to counterattack. However, things were different now. Lin Feng needed a large amount of cultivation resources. Actually, world origin was the most important thing. No one would complain about having too much world origin. Devouring the celestial devils and converting them into world origin became the top priority for the elders at the moment. Then, it was imperative to completely sweep through the other celestial devil worlds. Supremacy Divine Jade. I'd better return to the Epic Alliance headquarters to oversee it first. If anything similar to the incident with Ancestor Green would again, I can deal with it. We can't lose the Epic Alliance headquarters now, Lin Feng said to Supreme Divine Jade. That's just as well. The Epic Alliance is growing in power now. If you want to collect boundary stones, you'll still have to rely on the influence of the Epic Alliance. Moreover, with you guarding the home front, we can all rest assured. Supremacy Divine Jade nodded. Actually, there was something else that Supremacy Divine Jade did not say. It was safest for Lin Feng to guard the home front. Here, if those celestial devils fought to the death, many elders would probably be dragged down with them. Lin Feng was now the hope of all the controllers in the entire Epic Alliance. He must stay safe at all costs. It would naturally be best for him to guard the home front. Hence, Lin Feng bade farewell to the elders, turned around and left. He returned to the Epic Alliance headquarters. The hall fell silent again. Supremacy Divine Jade looked at Elder Ether and asked calmly, "Elder Ether, you're the only one who went back. How's your investigation on the Dark Domain Supremacy? Could he be a cultivator like Ancestor Greenwood?" This was also what Supremacy Divine Jade and even the other core elders were most worried about. If Lin Feng obtained a large amount of benefits, but refused to save Supremacy Epic in the end, their efforts would be in vain. Elder Ether said confidently, "Elders, don't worry. The past experiences of the Dark Domain Supremacy, Lin Feng has already explained everything. He is loyal and can even be considered someone who abhors evil. He shows no mercy to celestial devils at all, and is very protective of the controllers. If there's anyone he's a little similar to, it would be Supremacy Epic. Hence, the Dark Domain Supremacy is absolutely trustworthy." Hearing Elder Ether's high evaluation of Lin Feng, the many elders were completely assured. "All right, since we've already found our only hope, we have to give it a try. Elders, from now on, collect all the boundary stones, sweep through all the celestial devil worlds, and convert them into world origin for the Dark Domain Supremacy. Whether the Dark Domain Supremacy can become a 3-star supremacy in 10,000 years will depend on us," Supremacy Divine Jade said with a solemn expression. "Supremacy Divine Jade, don't worry. This is our only chance. Even if we have to risk our lives, we will definitely do our best to help the Dark Domain Supremacy." All the elders were filled with battle intent, and traces of excitement flickered in their eyes. They had seen hope, so they would seize it at all costs. Even without Supremacy Divine Jade's reminder, they would still do their best. After all, aiding the Dark Domain Supremacy to become a 3-star supremacy and save Supremacy Epic was in a sense saving themselves. Lin Feng returned safely to the Epic Alliance headquarters, and announced his seclusion immediately. In reality, he had just exited seclusion not long ago, but he had no choice but to enter seclusion this time. This was because the gains this time were too shocking. He had obtained a total of 100 billion portions of world origin, as well as boundary stones that could give rise to about 1 trillion worlds. In the past, Lin Feng had 250 billion portions of world origin. After giving Supremacy Round Heart 10 billion portions of world origin, there were still 240 billion portions left. Now, he had received another 100 billion portions of world origin, making for a total of 340 billion portions of world origin. Such a huge amount of world origin was completely enough to digest these boundary stones. Lin Feng did not hesitate at all. He unleashed the chaotic lotus and devoured all these boundary stones into his internal kiliocosm domain through the chaotic lotus. Buzz. One world after another and one kiliocosm domain after another began to be born. Of course, this time it would take even longer. Under normal circumstances, Lin Feng would need at least a few hundred years. After all, even if he had enough boundary stones and world origin, it would still take a very long time. Fortunately, Lin Feng could still afford to waste a few hundred years. However, there was no need. Lin Feng also needed time now. His current strength of 400 billion worlds was enough to accelerate time. Originally, time could be accelerated in the internal kiliocosm domain. However, Lin Feng still felt that it was not enough, so he used the rules of time to continue accelerating time, striving to digest all these boundary stones as fast as possible and convert them into his own strength. Only by ensuring his own strength could Lin Feng be at ease. Buzz. In a region in the void, a pillar of light suddenly descended from above, as if tearing through the void at once. A void passage was formed. It was dazzling, and its terrifying aura could be sensed within a radius of billions of miles. Some controllers who happened to pass by this area were all alarmed. What exactly is this? Could some kind of treasure be about to appear? It doesn't seem like a treasure, but more like the legendary Ascension passage. Could it be a Ascension passage opened by the medium kiliocosm? A Ascension passage has appeared in this unfamiliar region? Could a new medium kiliocosm faction be descending into our small kiliocosm? Perhaps this is an opportunity for us. It's a new faction. Once we join it, we'll be senior members. Some controllers looked at this beam of light and quickly made a very close guess. As the epical cataclysm approached, many of the secrets in the past were no longer secrets. Even the Epic Alliance could be considered to have stepped into the open. It had surfaced and was familiar to many controllers. Naturally, secrets such as the epical cataclysm spread. Many ordinary controllers learned that this world was just a small kiliocosm, and there was the medium kiliocosm above the small kiliocosm. They even learned about the kiliocosm sovereigns, the medium kiliocosm factions, and the Ascension passage. Those seemingly powerful factions in the past were actually all medium kiliocosm factions. Many controllers did not have so many considerations about the rights and the wrongs. In fact, they were also scared. When the epical cataclysm arrived, everything would be reduced to ashes. If not for the order forcefully maintained by the Epic Alliance, the entire small kiliocosm would probably be in complete chaos by now. However, even with the Epic Alliance forcefully maintaining order, undercurrents were still surging in the small kiliocosm. As the epical cataclysm approached, more and more controllers would take a risk, and even pay any price to survive the epical cataclysm. Joining the medium kiliocosm faction was also a solution. This was because if one joined the medium kiliocosm faction and completed the mission given by the kiliocosm sovereign, they might have a chance of being accepted by the kiliocosm sovereign into the medium kiliocosm, and thus avoid annihilation during the epical cataclysm. This huge beam of light in front of them might be a Ascension passage, and a path of hope for joining the medium kiliocosm faction. Hence, many controllers gathered around and waited silently. Boom! As the Ascension passage continued to expand, there were faint rumbles. Then, figures descended from the Ascension passage and gradually appeared. 1, 2, 3. There were actually a total of 16 controllers who had descended. Moreover, the aura on their bodies was incomparably majestic. Without exception, all of them were 2-star supremacies. In fact, the aura of the person in the lead was as deep as the ocean. Just his aura alone made many surrounding controllers feel like they were facing a formidable enemy, and as if they were about to suffocate. It was very difficult for them to even speak. Finally, all 16 controllers stepped out of the Ascension passage. Then, the 16 of them bowed respectfully towards the Ascension passage, before it gradually disappeared. We've already descended to the lower kiliocosm. His Majesty the Kiliocosm Sovereign gave us the mission to gain a foothold as soon as possible, and wait quietly for the collision of the 3 small kiliocosms to plunder benefits from it. The controller in the lead said indifferently. Supremacy Rosai, we don't have to investigate and search for detailed intelligence everywhere anymore. There are so many controllers here. They're all sources of intelligence. The 16 supremacies could clearly see that there were many controllers everywhere around them. In the past, when they descended from the medium kiliocosm, they would sometimes encounter such a situation. In particular, when they saw a trace of desire and fervor in those people's eyes, they understood their goal. We're going to operate in secret this time. It's not appropriate to be high profile. As for these people, get rid of all of them in case word gets out. A strange smile appeared on Supremacy Rosai's lips. At the same time, Supremacy Rosai took a step forward. His huge palm seemed to cover billions of kilometers around him, instantly enveloping these controllers. Sensing the terrifying power contained in this palm, and even traces of killing intent, the hundreds of controllers immediately panicked. Senior, we are all controllers sincerely seeking to join you. We know all the information about this small kiliocosm. Senior, please show mercy and take us all in. No, Senior, please spare us. Ah, these people from the medium kiliocosm don't treat us as controllers at all. Run quickly and tell the Epic Alliance. They must take revenge. As this huge palm landed, hundreds of controllers within a radius of billions of miles were all reduced to ashes and pulverized. All of them fell. Fools! A trace of disdain appeared on Supremacy Rosai's face, and the corners of his lips curled into a cold smile. He had seen many opportunists like these in the other small kiliocosms. They were simply ants and insignificant. Why would Supremacy Rosei care? Let's go and investigate the actual situation in this small kiliocosm. Supremacy Rosei and the other 16 supremacies left silently, as if no massacre had ever occurred here. The kiliocosm domain corridor calmed down again. Ripples gradually spread. A beam of light suddenly descended, and there were faint rumbles. As soon as the noise ended, 9 figures in blue robes appeared. This is the lower kiliocosm? What a backward world. However, the mission given by His Majesty the Kiliocosm Sovereign is more important. We have to seize the good spots. A collision between 3 small kiliocosms is an incredibly rare opportunity. We can't let others get the head start. These supremacies all nodded. In the boundless kiliocosm domain, a huge beam of light instantly appeared. Huh? That's a dissension passage, right? Another dissension passage has appeared. Hurry up and inform the Epic Alliance. That's right. Inform the Epic Alliance. The huge beam of light quickly disappeared, and dozens of supremacies descended. Moreover, as soon as these supremacies saw the surrounding controllers, their eyes revealed killing intent. No news must be leaked. Kill without mercy. Boom. With another massacre, countless controllers and living beings in the entire kiliocosm domain were forcefully erased. Similar things had happened from time to time in the past 100 years, but Supremacy Round Heart of the Epic Alliance could not do anything. He even vaguely sensed that something unusual was going on behind these events. Success! In the secret chamber, Lin Feng suddenly opened his eyes. This time, there was a smile on his lips, and a sharp glint appeared in his eyes. He heaved a long sigh of relief. Although there was no particularly huge commotion, in reality, Lin Feng's internal kiliocosm domain had long been turned upside down. This was because he had already digested all the boundary stones and obtained the combat power of a total of 1.1 trillion worlds. In addition to his original combat power of 400 billion worlds, Lin Feng had now officially crossed the threshold of 1 trillion worlds, reaching the combat power of 1.5 trillion worlds. Even among the core elders, such strength was enough to be ranked in the top 10. According to the news Lin Feng received, there were a total of 21 core elders in the Epic Alliance, including himself. All of them were supremacies above the 100 billion level. However, in reality, there were only 8 trillion level supremacies, and Supremacy Divine Jade was the only 10 trillion level supremacy. In total, there were only 9 supremacies at the trillion level or higher. Of course, including Lin Feng, there were 10 of them now. It had to be known that although the Epic Alliance could not represent all the controllers in the small kiliocosm, it could at least represent more than 90% of the powerful supremacies outside the medium kiliocosm factions. He could almost be considered one of the true top entities among the local supremacies of the small kiliocosm. Another 100 years have passed. Lin Feng frowned. Even though he had already accelerated time, there were simply too many worlds born. Moreover, his time acceleration did not go over the load, so it was naturally a little slow. However, it was also commendable. The last time, Lin Feng had only increased his combat power by 100 billion worlds in 100 years. Compared to before, Lin Feng's speed was already almost 10 times faster. However, Lin Feng originally still had 340 billion portions of world origin on him. Now, he had consumed about 110 billion portions of world origin, leaving only 230 billion portions of world origin. Even though it could still be considered a huge amount, Lin Feng had a vague feeling that as the Epic Alliance fully supported him in constantly collecting boundary stones, the number of boundary stones he would collect would definitely increase in the future, and the world origin consumed would naturally be a lot. Moreover, even trading for boundary stones required a large amount of world origin. It's time to go out. Lin Feng also knew that he could not just stay in seclusion. Be it collecting boundary stones or world origin, even if the Epic Alliance would help, Lin Feng could not just sit back and reap the benefits. He was also in charge of the safety of the Epic Alliance headquarters. He was a core elder presiding over the Epic Alliance headquarters. Elder Lin, you've finally exited seclusion. When Lin Feng exited seclusion, Supremacy Round Heart found Lin Feng immediately. Supremacy Round Heart, what's the matter? Could it be that all 10 billion portions of world origin have already been traded? Supremacy Round Heart nodded and said, those 10 billion portions of world origin were all traded 50 years ago. These are all the boundary stones obtained through trading. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. He had originally thought that if there was no limit placed on the quality of the boundary stones traded, it should not yield much. He did not expect the gains to greatly exceed his expectations. In 50 years, all 10 billion portions of world origin had been traded. That was actually a very fast speed. It had to be known that just these boundary stones were enough for Lin Feng to increase his combat power by at least another 100 billion worlds. If 10 billion portions of world origin are not enough, 30 billion portions of world origin would do. Supremacy Round Heart can trade at will. Lin Feng casually gave Supremacy Round Heart 30 billion portions of world origin. He believed that it was enough for Supremacy Round Heart to trade for a long time. He did not hesitate and devoured all these boundary stones directly. They could increase his combat power by about another 100 billion worlds. Currently, Lin Feng was improving his strength at almost every moment. This speed of improvement was simply astonishing and unimaginable. In the past, it had taken him a long time just to become a 10 billion level supremacy, and he had found it very difficult. But now, even if his combat power increased by 10 billion worlds in an instant, Lin Feng would no longer be excited. He was even used to it. Once one's strength reached a certain level, the speed would become faster and faster, and improvement would become easier and easier. This was because at that time, one's position, identity, strength, and so on could all help them in obtaining many cultivation resources. How could their speed of cultivation slow down? The reason why those core elders could not increase their strength was not that they did not have resources. On the contrary, they had a lot of resources, but they were limited by the capacity of the boundary stone, and could not increase their strength despite having resources. Lin Feng had no such worries. Transforming into a universe gave him almost infinite potential. There was no limit to it at all. Elder Lin, actually, I have another very important matter to report to you this time, Supremacy Round Heart said with a solemn expression. Lin Feng's identity was no longer the same as before. Not only was he the supreme elder of the First Light, he was also a core elder of the Epic Alliance. Even Supremacy Round Heart could not be as casual as before. Yes, what is it? Lin Feng found it a little strange. In the past, Supremacy Round Heart had been so serious. Elder Lin, perhaps you don't know this, but the entire small Kiliacosm has changed greatly in the past 100 years. Some medium Kiliacosm factions have been getting restless, and even caused some turmoils. There are also some unfamiliar medium Kiliacosm factions that have actually all descended into the small Kiliacosm through dissension passages. If that's all, it'd be fine. They're just making plans for the epical cataclysm. As long as it doesn't cause disputes, it's nothing serious. However, more and more controllers have descended, and all of them are above the 10 billion level. There are even 100 billion level supremacies, or even the legendary trillion level supremacies. Some controllers of medium Kiliacosm who descended are simply unscrupulous. As soon as they descended, they would wipe out a Kiliacosm domain, and even kill everyone who saw them descend. There are descenders from the medium Kiliacosm who belong to a few different major factions. They also fight and appear to be competing for something. Right now, our entire small Kiliacosm is in complete chaos, and has even lost its order. A large number of controllers and lifeforms die every day. If this continues, it will even affect our Epic Alliance. Even your boundary stone trades will be greatly affected, Elder Lin. Supremacy Round Heart's tone was solemn. He reported all the major events that had happened in the small Kiliacosm in the past 100 years to Lin Feng. Lin Feng's expression gradually darkened as well. He knew very well what kind of situation Supremacy Round Heart was describing. It was a situation without order. He knew very well that no matter how poor the order was, it was much better than no order at all. Why had the Epic Alliance stepped into the open? Wasn't it to stabilize the entire small Kiliacosm and prevent it from falling into chaos? In fact, wasn't the Epic Alliance fighting to the death with the Celestial Devils to prevent the Celestial Devils from disrupting the order of the entire small Kiliacosm? But now, the order of the small Kiliacosm had already been broken by those controllers who had descended from the medium Kiliacosm. Order was the bottom line of the Epic Alliance, and also Lin Feng's bottom line. Only by maintaining a well-ordered small Kiliacosm could Lin Feng obtain boundary stones and all kinds of resources continuously. But now, those descenders had crossed Lin Feng's bottom line. They deserved death. Lin Feng's chilling killing intent made Supremacy Round Heart's entire body tremble. Supremacy Round Heart did not know that Lin Feng had already become a trillion-level supremacy. Even 10 billion-level supremacies could not withstand a trace of Lin Feng's killing intent, let alone Supremacy Round Heart. Although he did not know what level Lin Feng had reached, Supremacy Round Heart knew very well that the weakest among those descenders from the medium Kiliacosm were 10 billion-level supremacies. Above them were 100 billion-level supremacies, and even trillion-level supremacies. How could Lin Feng deal with such terrifying entities? However, since Lin Feng had made the decision, no one could change it. Supremacy Round Heart. Have you found out why those descenders from the medium Kiliacosm descended into this small Kiliacosm one after another? Lin Feng did not lose his mind. Even if he really wanted to deal with those descenders from the medium Kiliacosm, he had to figure out their goal so that he could deal with them specifically. Actually, many people are confused and curious about this. However, descenders from the medium Kiliacosm seem to be very unified on this point. No one has revealed anything. Hence, up until now, I've tried all kinds of methods, but I still can't find out the true purpose of those descenders from the medium Kiliacosm. You don't know? Lin Feng was a little surprised, but then, he also felt that this matter was beginning to get interesting. There was still 1 billion years until the epical cataclysm. It was impossible for those descenders not to know. For them to descend, a Kiliacosm sovereign had to personally open the Dissension passage. Otherwise, even a 3-star supremacy would not be able to open a Dissension passage. In other words, these descenders had all obtained the approval of the Kiliacosm sovereigns, and were sent by the Kiliacosm sovereigns to this small Kiliacosm. So many 10 billion level, 100 billion level, or even trillion level supremacies should be considered high-level combatants even in the medium Kiliacosm factions, and could not be lost lightly. If they were just making arrangements in advance, there was no need to send down these powerful 10 billion level, 100 billion level, or even trillion level supremacies at all. Moreover, 1 or 2 descenders, or 1 or 2 descending factions could be considered a coincidence. However, with so many descenders and so many medium Kiliacosm factions involved, things were different. It was definitely not a coincidence, but a necessity. Many thoughts flashed through Lin Feng's mind. Something major must have happened for so many descenders to descend one after another, and it must be related to the small Kiliacosm. By the way, the Skyhorn Alliance has not opened the Dissension passage again for 200 years. Could this be the reason too? Lin Feng thought of the Skyhorn Alliance. That Kiliacosm sovereign hated Lin Feng to the bone. It was impossible for him to be indifferent. There must be some reason why Lin Feng had been left in peace for 200 years. There was no way to find out anything by guessing. Lin Feng also made a plan. Supremacy Round Heart, the outside world in chaos, and the situation is grim. I absolutely cannot let it be. It's for the purpose of maintaining order in the small Kiliacosm that the Epic Alliance fights with the Celestial Devils, and Supremacy Epic sacrificed himself to suppress the Celestial Devil ancestor. All these efforts of the Epic Alliance can't be wasted due to these descenders. Lin Feng had already made up his mind. It's time for me to get active. These descenders from the medium Kiliacosm are all arrogant and treat the controllers of small Kiliacosm like animals. Humph, they don't know that they are the true animals and slaves. They can only work for the Kiliacosm sovereigns for the rest of their lives, and there's no hope for them for the rest of their lives. A sharp glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. Supremacy Round Heart was shocked. He hurriedly persuaded, Elder Lin, why don't we contact the other core elders of the Epic Alliance? If a few core elders attack together, I believe those descenders from the medium Kiliacosm will also be wary. No need. I alone am enough. This was not Lin Feng being arrogant, But the truth. He was already a trillion-level supremacy. If he could not resolve this matter, how could the other core elders? Could they alert Supremacy Divine Jade? That was impossible. Supremacy Divine Jade was fighting with the Celestial Devils. There were also trillion-level entities among the Celestial Devils. Without the deterrence of Supremacy Divine Jade, the other core elders might not be able to hold the line. At that time, the resulting chain reaction would be consequences that the Epic Alliance could not afford. This matter could only be resolved by Lin Feng. Seeing Supremacy Round Heart's worried expression, Lin Feng said calmly, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Moreover, there might be people who can kill me, but they definitely won't be in the small Kiliacosm." With that, Lin Feng stepped forward and entered the spatial passage, disappearing without a trace. Damn it, it's Supremacy Rosai. In a Kiliacosm domain corridor, dozens of controllers were confronting each other. These two groups of controllers were clearly separated. For some reason, conflict broke out between them, and the Supremacies even fought until Supremacy Rosai appeared. Seeing Supremacy Rosai, the expressions of the other Supremacies all changed slightly. After all, Supremacy Rosai was a trillion supremacy. Even in the medium Kiliacosm, a trillion-level supremacy had a certain status. At the very least, their names would be remembered by the Kiliacosm sovereigns, and they would be entrusted with heavy responsibilities. Supremacy Grey Plume, we were the ones who occupied this Kiliacosm domain first. Why are you being so aggressive and forcing us to leave instead? Do you think there's no one capable among us? Supremacy Rosai glared as he said in a sharp tone. Supremacy Grey Plume felt a great deal of pressure. At the thought of His Majesty the Kiliacosm Sovereign's mission, however, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and say, "Supremacy Rosai, you're also someone who descended from the medium Kiliacosm. You should also be carrying a mission, so you naturally know what the great Kiliacosm Sovereign wants. If we can't complete our mission, the consequences will be unthinkable. This Kiliacosm domain is so huge. Even if there are more of us, it won't be a big deal. I hope Supremacy Rosai can do us a favor. I will definitely repay you in the future." The orders of the Kiliacosm Sovereign naturally could not be disobeyed. Hence, Supremacy Grey Plume knew very well that he had to put up a fight, even against Supremacy Rosai. After all, they had already arrived too late when they descended, and the good spots had already all been occupied. If the three small Kiliacosms really collided, there would be no benefit for them anymore. Supremacy Rosai's eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at Supremacy Grey Plume with a half-smile, making Supremacy Grey Plume's hair stand on end. In the end, Supremacy Rosai smiled coldly and said, "Supremacy Grey Plume, we've met once before. We'll forget about what happened today. Go back to where you came from." "Humph. What does it have to do with me if you can't complete the mission of your Kiliacosm Sovereign?" "You!" Supremacy Grey Plume was furious. If it were any other supremacy, he would have attacked long ago. However, he was only a 800 billion level supremacy, and was far from Supremacy Rosai's match. If he attacked, he would only be asking for humiliation. Supremacy Rosai is so demanding. He actually wants to monopolize this Kiliacosm domain. Supremacy Grey Plume, if we join forces, what can Supremacy Rosai do to us? Suddenly, another controller appeared, emitting a huge aura. Although he was slightly weaker than Supremacy Rosai, he should still be a trillion-level supremacy. Immediately, Supremacy Rosai's expression changed slightly. The atmosphere between the two parties was very tense, as if it was about to erupt at any moment. Alas, once these descenders fight, the entire Kiliacosm domain will be destroyed in an instant. When have they ever cared about our lives? These are descenders from the medium Kiliacosm. They treat us like animals. We might as well fight them to the death. Fight them to the death? With what? The strongest among us is only a one-star supremacy. What can we fight them with? If only the Epic Alliance could intervene. In the Kiliacosm domain, many controllers had sorrowful expressions. They were controllers after all and part of the trillions of living beings. However, when had they ever been taken seriously by these descenders? Their lives were probably as insignificant as dust in the other party's eyes, and beneath consideration. If the three parties of descenders fought now, the entire Kiliakosm domain would be buried along with them. In the end, the ones who would suffer heavy losses were still the native lifeforms of small Kiliakosms like themselves. Since when did the small Kiliakosm belong to you descenders? Suddenly, an unfamiliar voice appeared in the Kiliakosm domain corridor, echoing in the ears of many supremacies. Who is it? A sharp glint flashed across the eyes of the many supremacies. Buzz. In the void, circles of spatial ripples spread in all directions. At the same time, a white-robed figure appeared in the void. The white-robed man's eyes were bright as stars, and appeared incomparably profound. He glanced coldly at the three parties who had descended, then waved his hand and said, "I'll only say one thing. Go back to where you came from. This small Kiliakosm is not where you can act however you please." A determined voice sounded in the void of the Kiliakosm domain corridor, echoing for a long time. "How dare you?" As soon as the white-robed man finished speaking, the expressions of the three descenders changed drastically. They were the high and mighty descender supremacies. When had they ever been reprimanded like this? At this moment, only Supremacy Rosai's eyes narrowed slightly. He seemed to have thought of something and said slowly, "Dark Domain Supremacy of the Epic Alliance? You do know me." Lin Feng glanced at Supremacy Rosai in surprise. He could naturally tell that the other party was very, very strong. He was a trillion-level supremacy. Such trillion-level supremacies basically would not pay much attention to Lin Feng. Lin Feng did not expect the other party to actually know him. The Dark Domain Supremacy Lin Feng is rumored to be one of the core elders of the Epic Alliance. How arrogant! He dares to come here alone. You simply have a death wish. So what if you're a core elder of the Epic Alliance? I'll kill you like a fledgling. Hearing Lin Feng's name, it was not like these descenders did not know anything. On the contrary, they had all heard of Lin Feng. After all, in the past few centuries, Lin Feng's reputation had been at its peak in the Epic Alliance. However, they did not expect that while they hadn't found trouble with the Epic Alliance, a controller of the Epic Alliance had come to find trouble with them first. Moreover, his words were so disrespectful. For a moment, many descenders developed killing intent towards Lin Feng. Compared to these malicious descenders, when the controllers in the Kiliakosm domain saw Lin Feng, all of them cried tears of joy and cheered. It's an elder of the Epic Alliance, the Dark Domain Supremacy. We are saved. The Dark Domain Supremacy ascended to power rapidly in hundreds of years, and has been undefeated. He even killed the legendary ancestor Greenwood. These descenders are nothing. The Epic Alliance still hasn't forgotten about us in the end. If we're lucky enough to survive this time, we must apply to join the Epic Alliance. Even if we can't join the Epic Alliance, I'll go to the front line and fight with the Celestial Devils. The Epic Alliance is what all controllers like us can truly rely on. Some controllers in the Kiliakosm domain even cried tears of joy. In the past, they had been selfish. Even though they knew the danger of the Celestial Devils, they were unwilling to go to the front line. Even though they admired the Epic Alliance and Supremacy Epic, many controllers would still hesitate about really joining the Epic Alliance to resist the Celestial Devils. After this incident, they felt extremely guilty for their previous thoughts. In the eyes of the Descenders, they were like animals. Instead, the ones who came to save them in the end was the core elder of the Epic Alliance. It had to be said that they were extremely touched. However, there were also some controllers who were worried for Lin Feng. It was obvious that these three parties of Descenders were not to be trifled with. There were 10 billion level supremacies, 100 billion level supremacies, and even trillion level supremacies. Could Lin Feng deal with them? After all, on the surface, the strength Lin Feng had displayed was only at the level of 100 billion. Swish! A 100 billion level supremacy actually attacked directly and discreetly. He was the closest to Lin Feng. When his power erupted at once, terrifying world power surged and swept over. There were at least 500 billion worlds. Seeing this scene, the other Descenders did not remind him. Instead, They watched calmly how Lin Feng would deal with it. Attacking me is unforgivable. You deserve to die. Lin Feng did not seem to care at all. He did not even mobilize the world power in his body much. Instead, he flicked his finger. Buzz. The invisible rules of time instantly landed on the descender who attacked with Lin Feng's finger. Immediately, the dignified 500 billion level supremacy could not move at all, and his entire body froze. Moreover, what was even more terrifying was Lin Feng's next flick of a finger. This flick of a finger looked ordinary, as if it was just a light flick. However, only that 500 billion level supremacy could sense the terrifying power contained in this finger. Once this power erupted, he could not dodge it. He was frozen by the rules of time, and his entire being was a living target. He could only resist this strike head-on. Thud. With a muffled sound, Lin Feng's finger had already pressed hard on the descender, who's a 500 billion level supremacy. Immediately, the dignified descender, who's a 500 billion level supremacy, trembled violently, as if he had suffered a heavy blow. His internal kiliocosm domain was turned upside down, and began to collapse on a frightful scale. Kept collapsing. All the worlds were collapsing. From the first world to 100 million worlds, 1 billion worlds, then 10 billion worlds. Once a world began to collapse, as if a chain reaction was triggered, worlds began to collapse on a large scale. This is bad. Let him go. What audacity! Kill. How dare a mere controller of a small kiliocosm be so impudent? Actually, only the span of a breath had passed since Lin Feng attacked. In fact, not even a breath had passed. Could be said to be an instant. In an instant, just a finger had put a dignified 500 billion level descender supremacy in danger. Many descenders had yet to recover from their shock, but at this moment, they had no choice but to attack. However, only one side attacked, and that was Supremacy Grey Plume's side. They were both shocked and furious. They did not expect Lin Feng to be able to subdue a 500 billion level descender supremacy in the blink of an eye. But now that 500 billion level supremacy was already in danger, they had no choice but to save him. At this moment, even the powerful controller who was close to a trillion level supremacy attacked Lin Feng. Moreover, once he attacked, the impact would be earth-shattering. The terrifying world power swept over instantly like a volcanic eruption. It was vast and majestic, ready to crush Lin Feng into dust. If it were any other 100 billion level supremacy, or even an ordinary trillion-level supremacy, they might retreat or avoid the attack. After all, when these dozen or so descenders joined forces, the strength of all these 100 billion-level supremacies was unimaginable. However, Lin Feng only extended his other hand and met it with a single palm. Boom! Streaks of light flashed above Lin Feng's head. Then, worlds and kiliocosm domains erupted instantly like a surging torrent, and their auras rose to the extreme. Get lost! Lin Feng's yell was like a thunderclap. His combat power of 1.5 trillion worlds slammed down a huge hand. The dozen or so descenders immediately felt as if they had suffered a heavy blow. Their entire bodies shook, and they were actually repelled by Lin Feng's palm strike. At the same time, Lin Feng opened his other palm and grabbed the dying 500 billion level supremacy hard. Put him down! You dare to kill him? We are under the orders of His Majesty, the Great Kiliocosm Sovereign, to descend to the lower Kiliocosm. If you kill him, you are going against His Majesty, the Great Kiliocosm Sovereign. Supremacy Grey Plume and the others were both shocked and furious. Who would have thought that in just an instant, after 2 exchanges of blows, they were already at an absolute disadvantage? Is that so? I've destroyed more than 1 or 2 Kiliocosm Sovereign's forces. I've said that you can scram back to where you came from. Otherwise, I'll kill you without mercy. As soon as Lin Feng finished speaking, his palm that was grabbing the 500 billion supremacy clenched down hard. Thud. The dignified 500 billion level supremacy, a descender from the medium Kiliocosm, was crushed by Lin Feng without putting up the slightest resistance. He was reduced to dust before he could even let out a scream, and fell completely. Silence. It was incomparably silent. With a finger and a palm like crushing an ant, Lin Feng easily crushed a descender who was a 500 billion level supremacy. How terrifying was this? Even those descenders who were 100 billion level supremacies could not help but shudder when they looked at Lin Feng's figure. Their hearts palpitated fiercely, as if they had seen something horrifying. Who would have thought that this would be the outcome? Supremacy Grey Plume's face was ashen. A 500 billion level supremacy under his command was dead. Even he probably would not have a good time when he returned to the medium Kiliacosm. A 500 billion level supremacy could no longer be considered a nobody. In fact, if he could not complete His Majesty the Kiliacosm Sovereign's mission, he would not even have the chance to return to the medium Kiliacosm. However, the dark domain supremacy in front of him, Lin Feng, appeared so ferocious. In particular, just now, he had resisted more than a dozen 100 billion level supremacies alone without moving at all. This made Supremacy Grey Plume even more wary. "You're a trillion level supremacy." Supremacy Grey Feather enunciated each word clearly as he stared intently at Lin Feng. Even the most ignorant person would know that the strength Lin Feng had displayed just now was definitely not at the 100 billion level, but at the trillion level. Wasn't Lin Feng only a 100 billion level supremacy some time ago? How did he become a trillion level supremacy in the blink of an eye? It would be impossible to say that he was not wary. At the very least, Lin Feng had repelled more than 10 100 billion level supremacies like Supremacy Grey Plume with one hand, and crushed a 500 billion supremacy with the other. All these feats made even these insufferably arrogant and condescending descenders wary. However, Supremacy Grey Plume's gaze swept across the many descenders, and he said sinisterly, "Dark Domain Supremacy, are you trying to start a war with all the descenders from the medium Kiliacosm?" He was clearly trying to divert the trouble and get the other descenders from the medium Kiliacosm to join forces to deal with Lin Feng. Under normal circumstances, Lin Feng definitely would not fall for it. After all, there were many descenders here. If he was not careful, he might be surrounded and attacked. However, Lin Feng was here this time to eliminate all the troublemakers who had descended. He could not be bothered to feign civility with these descenders. At this moment, he had to appear very domineering. Moreover, seeing that these descenders did not care about the billions of living beings in those Kiliacosm domains at all, Lin Feng had already made up his mind. Lin Feng took a long look at Supremacy Grey Plume, Supremacy Rosai, and the others. Then, he placed his hands behind his back and said coldly, "I've said before that if your hands are stained with blood, you descenders will go back to where you came from." Boom! As soon as Lin Feng finished speaking, it immediately caused an uproar. Hearing this, Supremacy Grey Plume was even more overjoyed. He laughed loudly and said, "Ha ha ha! Have you all heard that? The Epic Alliance is so bold. Such a domineering claim. They want to chase us away. They don't even seem to take the Kiliacosm Sovereigns seriously. There are so many descenders here. Do you actually want to chase us all away?" Supremacy Grey Plume smiled coldly. He wanted to see how Lin Feng would answer. Lin Feng glanced at Supremacy Grey Plume. Just this glance made Supremacy Grey Plume feel incomparably cold, as if a huge crisis was arriving. "Shut up. Looks like you don't want to leave. Then, forget about going back. Stay here forever." How could Lin Feng not know that Supremacy Grey Plume's words contained a nefarious motive? He could not be bothered to answer anymore and attacked directly. Boom! The power of a trillion worlds in Lin Feng's body erupted instantly. The surging world power was infused on his palm as he grabbed directly towards Supremacy Grey Plume. Supremacy Grey Plume cried out in agony. How could he have expected that Lin Feng would be so bold and arrogant? Lin Feng actually did not answer at all and killed him directly. Seeing Lin Feng's huge palm descend towards him from all around, Supremacy Grey Plume was truly terrified. He roared and immediately asked the other dozen or so 100 billion level supremacies to attack together. Although he was also very close to the trillion level, he was not a trillion level supremacy after all. How could he resist Lin Feng, a trillion level supremacy? Moreover, Lin Feng's style of attacking immediately at the slightest disagreement also surprised Supremacy Grey Plume. Since when did a controller of a small Kiliacosm become so bold? he actually dared to attack descenders from the medium kiliocosm casually. Was he really not afraid of the kiliocosm sovereigns? This was also because Supremacy Grey Plume had only been in the small kiliocosm for a short period of time, and did not know about Lin Feng's glorious deeds. Along the way, Lin Feng had already destroyed more than 1 or 2 medium kiliocosm factions. Why would he care about the kiliocosm sovereigns? If the kiliocosm sovereign could really come to the small kiliocosm, he would not have sent these supremacies here. Lin Feng was completely unrestrained and completely fearless. Moreover, he was a trillion-level supremacy. Supremacy Grey Plume really had no way of dealing with such a person. Lin Feng did not hold back at all in this strike. Instead, he went all out, vowing to kill Supremacy Grey Plume. However, when Lin Feng's huge palm landed, it did not injure Supremacy Grey Plume. Someone had intervened, and many did not expect who had intervened. It was actually Supremacy Rosai. Huh? You want to stop me too? Lin Feng said indifferently. Supremacy Rosai smiled and looked deeply at Supremacy Grey Plume. Even though he had been at odds with Supremacy Grey Plume previously, he had saved Supremacy Grey Plume again now. This was because Supremacy Rosai could tell Lin Feng's true goal at a glance. He wanted to kill all the descenders. Even Supremacy Rosai could not believe that Lin Feng had such boldness. However, he did not dare to take the risk. Even though he had a conflict with Supremacy Grey Plume, Supremacy Grey Plume did not dare to really kill him. To a certain extent, Lin Feng's arrogance had already angered Supremacy Grey Plume and many descenders. It's not me who wants to stop Dark Domain Supremacy, but us. The Dark Domain Supremacy has announced that he wants to chase away all descenders like us. How can we just sit back and do nothing? As soon as Supremacy Rosai finished speaking, the trillion-level supremacies among the descenders on the other side also stepped forward calmly. He looked at Lin Feng menacingly, his killing intent evident. At this moment, Supremacy Grey Plume also came back to his senses. Seeing that the 2 trillion-level supremacies had both stepped forward, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. He also stood where he was, and they surrounded Lin Feng in the middle. How foolish! Even if there are conflicts between us medium kiliocosm factions, we can resolve them. We're not as arrogant as the Dark Domain Supremacy, who is actually trying to chase away all the descenders. This time, the Dark Domain Supremacy is dead for certain. Even the entire Epic Alliance will be completely destroyed. Supremacy Grey Plume's expression was incomparably twisted as various malicious thoughts flashed through his mind. He already hated Lin Feng to the bone. In front of so many descenders, Supremacy Grey Plume had been defeated by Lin Feng and almost died. This was simply humiliating. When had Supremacy Grey Plume ever suffered such humiliation? He naturally hated Lin Feng to the bone. The 3 of them surrounded Lin Feng in the middle and locked onto his aura. Clearly, they were not going to let Lin Feng leave. The atmosphere between the 2 parties was tense. A great battle was imminent.